When stagflation happens, the economic movement slows down, thus the ability to have goods sold, assets sold, lessens. At the same time, the prices of goods and the prices of assets would usually rise. That's the inflationary part of it. However, the dilemma lives within the formula. While the value of money is decreasing because of the act of inflation, there is another thing happening there, which is the supply to demand non-balance. Thus, stagnation is taking place. And usually when stagnation takes place, it doesn't take place because of the excess supply, it takes place because of the very low demand. And fundamentals of economics and fundamentals of the markets would dictate at that point of time that many people are redundant, many people are out of jobs, many people are earning much less than they can. At the same time, because of the rise of prices of goods, the formula, balance in the formula falls apart and they aren't able to buy as much. At the same time, there's fear and non-visibility, non-clarity of the future lead to people not using their money, saving it, and trying not to buy any non-necessities. All of those work along each other by themselves, crippling the economy further. And then more inflation happens because supply chain difficulties, production difficulties can take place until the course of the economy turns around. And it takes some time, it gets balanced, and we move through to another cycle, another mega cycle. And by mega cycle, as you know, there is short-term cycles, there's medium-term cycles, the long-term cycles, and then there's mega cycles that incorporates within it or encapsulates plenty of cycles. It's usually every 80 to 100 years. There's no reference to that because we don't have indexes of the last 1,000 years to have reference, but we have the last 200 years on and off, so we can create a kind of reference to that. Now, how to weather stagflation? I'll not talk about how to weather stagflation from an investor's point of view purely. I'll talk about how to weather stagflation as a human being who is earning, spending, at the same time saving and investing. So the first thing I want to tell you is think of it that way. Money of tomorrow will be worth much less than money of today. At the same time, prices of goods will be rising because of that matter. At the same time, consuming and consumption will go down. So generally, the best thing to own and to have and to invest in such times is something that cash flows, where the cash flow works with inflation. So in other words, if you invest in something that pays you tomorrow the dollars of today, then it's paying you less with time when the dollar, and by dollar I don't mean just the US dollar, I mean the currency of today, it's earning tomorrow less than today in regular terms and in real terms. However, if you are investing in an asset that earns tomorrow dollars of tomorrow that work alongside the general economy that form part of that inflationary basket, then you are earning better. Now, there is a very interesting study that came recently from a very respected hedge fund that talks about how do assets weather stagflation. And within that, it showed that something like real estate weathers very bad. Let me explain that to you because that part is very important. People look at that and they see that real estate generally performs very bad. Actually, one of the worst type of assets that performs, while something like gold performs at its best. Now, what happens within those periods is demand for real estate falls. Real estate becomes less liquid. So what happens with assets like real estate is for whoever wanting to sell, they need to give a significant discount. And that, by the way, happens today in markets where it is slow. It happened even in the boom times in markets that is slow. Not all markets have liquid and enough liquidity within the real estate market. So when you are in an unliquid market, a property value at the end of the day is what somebody is ready to pay for it. So if people are ready to pay less, You need to continue dropping the price if you need to sell to match somebody's price. And that's why you see that dip in value. It's similar to what happened within the COVID times of 2020. However, those times usually do not get impacted, not COVID times, but generally the stagflation time, do not get impacted unless there is a serious fundamental shakedown, and usually it will be short-lived. Do not get impacted or do not impact the cash flows that such property or such asset generates. So when you look at the performance of that asset from a value proposition of what someone is ready to pay for it today, you will see that that have dropped. But when you look at it from the cash flow position, you see that this asset is paying me today in today's dollars, in today's money, in today's value of money, and usually it's catching up, with the exception of very few seriously controlled markets when it comes to rent. So it's catching up with inflation. Thus, you are being paid and rewarded for holding that asset fairly on that day. Now, this means that cap rates grow rather than you earning 5% today because the value dropped virtually, and really actually because this is what somebody is ready to pay for it if you need to sell. If you're holding it and the rental have gone up, the ratio of rental to the value has grown, and thus you hold assets that are more productive. This signifies to people who are long-term holders, to non-traders, and to the average Joe, if they purchase the right assets that can be rented at all times and can perform well, similar to assets that are usually prime location, unique in proposition of an experience, sea views, beachfronts, and the likes. As long as you hold such an asset, you perform well, and you weather that period very well, and you exit it. And that does not only link to real estate. I am biased towards real estate, but obviously it can link to too many things in your life. I know only real estate of them because equities do not fall within that bracket, in my view at least, and I believe scientifically as well. Commodities do not pay you anything, so yes, they grow in value, and that chart showed a minus 32% for real estate and a plus 54% for commodities, for gold and the precious metals, plus 23 probably for a general basket of commodities. They do not pay you cash flow, and bonds and the likes do pay you cash flow. However, they suffer with time. In general, you don't get paid as much because they're perceived as less risk, although I'm not sure that that's real with shakeups in economies and with such challenging times for governments as well as corporates. So what you need to look at is how to weather inflation or an inflationary period. You weather it by holding an asset that pays you in tomorrow's value. How to weather a period which has stagnation married with inflation, so a stagflationary period, and where the inflationary side is a hyperinflation and a stagnation side is a fundamental economic issue that is stopping people from earning, thus spending. You will need to hold an asset that pays you healthily, consistently in tomorrow's dollar value, and at the same time hold a reserve that allows you, if you have a mortgage over that asset or not, to service that asset held for a significant period of time. So keep a reserve fund on the side. Those are my 5 cents on how would you handle a stagflationary period in the best way possible. And yes, unfortunately, it's coming, but that's part of the cycle. Our generation have lived beautiful days, fascinating days. We'll live stagnationary days, and for some of us, it will be beautiful days still. Unfortunately, for some others, it won't. I hope that it turns around to be happy days. For everyone, or the most number of people, it's possible to impact in a positive manner.